calls me, we're talking, it's just, how you doing? I heard about it. And you can almost hear both of us with some tears in our eyes. And I'm choked up because he did call me.
When I heard about Magic, it's just like I had no energy. I didn't want to, it's the first time I can ever remember not wanting to play basketball. And it had a pit in my stomach for days after. Even after I talked to him, because in my mind, 9 or 10 years, he's going to be gone.
Boston Celtics legend Larry Bird was never known for wearing his emotions on his sleeve. After the tragic death of his father when he was just 18 years old, Bird later reflected that he had buried the pain rather than openly grieving. That is why his reaction to the news that Magic Johnson had been diagnosed with HIV stunned so many people. Bird described that phone call as one of the most heartbreaking moments of his life, saying it brought back feelings unlike anything he had experienced in years. For a man whose toughness defined his public image, those words revealed just how much Magic meant to him and how their legendary rivalry had grown into a friendship that transcended basketball.
The day that I heard about Magic, it just sort of changed my love for basketball. It shook me up. You get that feeling, probably the same type of feeling I had with my father.
Larry Bird built his reputation on being unshakable. Throughout one of the greatest careers in NBA history, he rarely let anyone see emotion, no matter how painful the moment. He battled through devastating injuries, heartbreaking playoff losses, and relentless physical pain without ever showing weakness. That is why one phone call changed everything. Bird later said learning that Magic Johnson had been diagnosed with HIV was one of the most devastating moments of his life, comparing the shock to the darkest period he had ever endured. For someone who almost never spoke in those terms, the weight of those words was impossible to ignore. On November 7, 1991, Magic stood before reporters at the Great Western Forum in Los Angeles and announced he had tested positive for HIV, retiring from the NBA immediately. At the time, it was widely viewed as a life-threatening diagnosis with limited treatment options, and fear surrounded the disease across the world. The basketball world instantly stopped thinking about championships and started worrying about whether one of its brightest stars would survive. Bird later recalled that he had been asleep when the news broke, and the story of how he learned the truth, shared years later during an interview with David Letterman, remains one of the most emotional accounts of their legendary friendship.
I remember the day we had a game that night. I always took a nap in the afternoon. My wife woke me up and said, "Hey, Lon Rosen called. You need to call Magic." So when I heard that, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I can remember back my father died, and my heart just sort of, he fluttered a little bit. When I heard about Magic, it's just like I had no energy. I didn't want to, it's the first time I can ever remember not wanting to play basketball. And it had a pit in my stomach for days after. Even after I talked to him, because in my mind, 9 or 10 years, he's going to be gone.
Think about what Larry Bird was saying. For the first time in his life, basketball didn't matter. This was a man whose entire identity revolved around competition, a player who practiced until exhaustion, battled through unbearable back pain, and refused to let injuries keep him off the court. Yet one phone call changed his perspective in an instant. When Bird learned that Magic Johnson had been diagnosed with HIV, his first thought wasn't about the NBA or what it meant for the league. He only wanted to know whether his friend was going to be okay. But what happened next made the story even more remarkable. Bird wasn't satisfied with hearing the news secondhand. He insisted on speaking to Magic himself. According to both men, Bird called Magic's agent, Lon Rosen, and asked to be connected immediately. Rosen explained that Magic was overwhelmed and dealing with countless calls, but Bird refused to wait. He made it clear that he needed to speak with him right then. When the call finally went through, the conversation that followed became one of the most unforgettable moments in their decades-long friendship. More than 30 years later, both Bird and Magic have looked back on that phone call, and for Magic, the memory still carries the same emotional weight it did on that November afternoon.
Calls me, we're talking, it's just, how you doing? I heard about it. And you can almost hear both of us with some tears in our eyes. And I'm choked up because he did call me.
Think about what Magic Johnson was really saying. The emotion wasn't simply about the diagnosis. It was about who reached out when everything changed. Of all the people in his life, the call that stayed with him came from Larry Bird, the man the basketball world had spent more than a decade calling his greatest rival. In the moment when fear and uncertainty surrounded him, Bird wasn't thinking about championships, rivalries, or the NBA. He was thinking about his friend. That phone call reminded Magic that their relationship had grown far beyond basketball. Years later, he still speaks about it with emotion, saying that Bird's immediate support left a lasting impression and taught him a lesson about loyalty, compassion, and the kind of friendship that exists when the spotlight fades.
When something happens to you, and then you find out who really your friends are and people who really care about you, you figure all those battles, all those things we had to go through as warriors, as competitors, then as men, and here this man says, hey, you know what, man, you're okay. And so that was the greatest moment for me too, to have him check on me and to make sure I was okay.
Think about how extraordinary that is. Magic Johnson won 5 NBA championships, 3 league MVP awards, and helped define the Showtime era with the Lakers. He defeated Larry Bird in the legendary 1979 NCAA championship game, battled him in 3 unforgettable NBA finals, and built one of the greatest careers basketball has ever seen. Yet when Magic reflected on the moments that meant the most, he pointed to a phone call from Larry Bird. Not because it changed his basketball career, but because it reminded him that their relationship had become something far greater than a rivalry. For years, fans saw them as opponents fighting for championships, but beneath that competition was a level of respect and genuine friendship that few people truly understood. In one of the darkest moments of his life, Bird reached out not as a rival, but as a friend, and Magic has often said that gesture meant more to him than any trophy ever could. In another interview, he explained exactly why that phone call has stayed with him for the rest of his life.
I wanted him to know directly from me and his support along the way, that not just then 20 years ago, but for the last 20 years have been unbelievable. And you find out who your friends are really when something like this happens to you.
Then came the moment that said everything about their relationship. Larry Bird called Magic Johnson and, according to Magic's own recollections, told him he loved him. For a man known for keeping his emotions hidden, those words carried enormous weight. In that instant, championships, MVP awards, and years of fierce competition no longer mattered. The rivalry that had defined an era gave way to something much deeper, a genuine friendship built on years of mutual respect. Around the same time, Celtics rookie Rick Fox later recalled searching the practice facility for Bird after learning the news. He eventually found him alone in the training room, watching Magic's press conference, overcome with emotion. It was a side of Larry Bird that almost no one had ever witnessed. That evening, Bird took the court against the Atlanta Hawks, but he later admitted his heart wasn't in the game. Basketball suddenly felt insignificant compared to what his friend was facing. Bird was already battling severe back problems that would soon bring his legendary career to an end, yet he pushed through one final season before joining Magic as co-captains of the iconic 1992 Dream Team in Barcelona. After spending more than a decade as basketball's greatest rivals, they finally stood side by side wearing the same USA jersey. Bird would retire shortly afterward, and Magic later reflected on their friendship in a way that forever changed how people viewed one of sport's greatest rivalries.